Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lev Parnas' Diaries from Home Confinement. For those of you that don't know me, I used to be part of Donald Trump's inner circle and Trump's cult. Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani sent me to Ukraine to dig up dirt on Joe and Hunter Biden. Now that I'm out of the cult and finishing up my sentence on home confinement, I want to share some of my diary stories with you. Last week, the Oversight Committee, led by Representative James Comer, held a hearing to spread more conspiracy theories into Joe and Hunter Biden. Representative Jamie Raskin read portions of my letter and entered it into evidence. Like most of you, I've been watching the GOP led by Senator Chuck Grassley, Representative James Comer, and their cohorts like Marjorie Greene continue to spread misinformation and spread conspiracy theories related to Joe and Hunter Biden to confuse the American public, and most importantly, to distract from the real criminal, their leader, twice impeached, twice indicted, and with more indictments coming, Donald J. Trump. I'm currently in the process of writing my tell-all book. It's called Shadow Diplomacy, detailing everything that transpired in the Trump's administration pertaining to the Bidens and much, much more. Since the book is not scheduled to be released for a few more months, as a concerned citizen and someone that loves our country, I had to do more. I had to act now. So I decided to take pen to paper and write James Comer a letter describing of what actually transpired in our year-and-a-half-long investigation into Hunter and Joe Biden. Now I'm going to read the letter to you, and then we'll go discuss some things afterwards. Dear Chairman Comer, as I've been closely following the developments in Congress and investigations into both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I believe I can place the facts in context for you. I write you as a concerned American who wishes only to share the information that I know to be true so that we can lay to the rest the conspiracy theories about Biden's supposed corruption in Ukraine once and for all. I feel I have a responsibility to remind you, our representatives and the American people, of what actually happened during Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump's efforts to uncover information about the Bidens in Ukraine. From November 2018 to October 2019, I was a key participant and a witness to these efforts. In every event I described below, I was either physically present in the room with the people involved, on the phone calls with Giuliani individuals in questions, often interpreting between Ukrainian and Russian English languages, or communicating directly with Giuliani about the situation. Please consider that the facts I state here have never changed from when I first submitted to Congress everything I knew in November 2019. It has always been my intention to tell the truth because I love this country with my whole heart, and I want our government to unite for the greater good instead of chasing false stories to divide us. By reading the information below, you will understand the full extent of the campaign orchestrated by Giuliani and Trump to dig up dirt on the Bidens and to spread misinformation about them through various networks, including government officials, journalists, and Fox News personnel. You will also see clearly that there is no evidence of Joe and Hunter Biden interfering with Ukrainian politics, and there's never been. Statements suggesting otherwise have been debunked again and again. I hope that the breadth of my experiences, which are all backed up by materials previously shared with Congress, will provide that no stone has been unturned in this investigation. So here are the facts as I know them to be true. Starting in November of 2018, I was approached by Rudy Giuliani, who asked me about my contacts in Ukraine and if I could verify some information he received about Joe Biden. A video had been recently shared online in which Biden, being interviewed by Council of Foreign Relations, said that in 2016 he had pressured Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko to fire his Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin. Giuliani told me he had discussed this with then President Trump, not only Biden's statement in the video, but also his discovery that Biden's son Hunter was on the board of the Ukrainian energy company called Burisma, and that Shokin was supposedly looking into possible corruption in the company. When Giuliani spoke to me, he got very excited and said, "This is the smoking gun we've been looking for," meaning he saw it was a way to discredit the Bidens. Later that month, I attended a Hanukkah celebration at the White House where Giuliani and Trump were both present. Trump approached me briefly to say, quote, "Rudy told me good things. Keep up the good work," unquote, and then gave me the thumbs up in approval. I met with Shokin for the first time in Ukraine in December of 2018. Giuliani had instructed me to relay a message to him, which is essentially that if he wanted to be reinstated as Prosecutor General, a goal that he expressed very openly, that the Trump administration could help him get his position back, but only if he provided hard evidence of Joe Biden's corruption. Initially, Shokin said that he had decided not to investigate Burisma further. But when I gave him the Giuliani's message, he became shifty in his answers, admitting that to his team was looking into it without giving further details. I returned from Ukraine. Giuliani told me to ask Shokin to fly to the United States to meet up with Senator Lindsey Graham. When he was speaking to the visa authorities, he should tell them he was only going to California to see his daughter, not that he would be traveling to Washington, D.C. to meet Lindsey Graham. However, when Shokin applied for the visa, then Ambassador Maria Ivanovich denied him. Communication ensued where Giuliani continued to pressure Shokin into helping him get information on the Bidens. Although Shokin was being skeptical because Giuliani could not get him a visa approved, and he didn't understand how the President of the United States and his personal representative could not achieve something like that, eventually they had a 45-minute Skype call in January of 2019, where I served as an interpreter between the two of them, and of which there was a recording that I later submitted to Congress. The recording shows Giuliani aggressively asking Shokin for details on the Bidens. Even though Shokin was trying to push the narrative that he had lost his job because the pressure Joe Biden had put on President Poroshenko to fire him, when asked directly by Giuliani, he conceded that there was no evidence of either Hunter or Joe Biden doing anything that interfered with Ukrainian law. Giuliani continued to receive conspiracy theories from different sources and remained insistent that there must be some data on the Biden's corruption. In late January 2019, my business partner Igor Fruman got word that Yuri Lutsenko, Shokin's replacement as Ukrainian Prosecutor General, was in New York and wanted to meet with Giuliani to discuss some legal matters. We set up a meeting in Giuliani's office on Park Avenue. There, Lutsenko explained he'd requested a meeting because he wanted to sit down with Bill Barr, an Attorney General, to discuss overall problems of Ukrainian-American corruption, including the funneling of Ukrainian money into American institutions. Giuliani stopped Lutsenko and said he wasn't interested in that, only in information concerning Joe and Hunter Biden. He then added statements to the effect that if Lutsenko wanted a conversation with Bill Barr, he would need to offer a give and take, and Giuliani was interested in details about the Bidens. Even though Lutsenko protested and he didn't come to discuss the Bidens, he'd agreed to see what he could find for Giuliani. The next day, we met in Giuliani's office, and Lutsenko brought a folder containing purported wire transfers from Burisma to Hunter Biden and documents from the Prosecutor General's office outlining the company's hierarchy and organization from its CEO, Mykola Zlochevsky, on down. These documents did show that the Prosecutor General's office was doing in its investigation into Burisma, but again, there was no evidence in any of these materials that pointed to any criminal activity from Hunter or Joe Biden. During the meeting, Giuliani stopped to call President Trump for about 3 to 5 minutes to update him on how the meeting was going with Lutsenko. And then he came back and told Lutsenko that Trump was very happy with the help he was giving, and he gave Lutsenko the thumbs up. Lutsenko then promised that if we went to Ukraine, he would help us meet with President Poroshenko and other officials who were dealing directly with Burisma investigation. After the first meeting, Lutsenko kept pressuring Giuliani that he needed to meet Bill Barr. However, Giuliani eventually told Lutsenko he hadn't provided enough information and that the only way he could meet Bill Barr was if he retained Giuliani for $200,000. He then gave Lutsenko a contract. It should be noted that Lutsenko refused to pay the $200,000. Until this day, he has never met Bill Barr. A few days later, Giuliani told me that he decided that it might not be a good look for him to represent Ukrainian officials while representing Donald Trump, and introduced me to attorneys Victoria Tunzing and Joseph DiGeneva, who he said would represent Lutsenko instead. Later on, Giuliani told me that Tunzing and DiGeneva had agreed to split the $200,000 retainer fee with him and some part with him. In subsequent calls with Giuliani, Lutsenko was still upset and complaining about the whole situation, arguing that he shouldn't have to pay anything to meet with one attorney general to another, particularly because they had discussed criminal matters between their respective countries. In February of 2019, Giuliani and I met Lutsenko in Poland, where the Prosecutor General was now more favorable to the idea of helping the Trump team investigation into the Bidens. He said President Poroshenko would meet with us, so Giuliani at that point decided that I should go straight from Poland to Ukraine on his behalf. I then had a 3-hour meeting with Poroshenko. Giuliani's message to the President Poroshenko, who was running for re-election at the time, was that Trump would support him and help him win if he made an official announcement into the investigation of Joe Biden. Poroshenko was taken back and relayed to me that he didn't trust Trump based on the bad deal they had made in 2018. At the time, he and Trump had met at the White House, and after the meeting, one of Trump's aides suggested that Poroshenko should buy coal from a Pennsylvania coal company. The reason they explained was that Trump was about to have a rally in part of the state, and the purchase would be a good look for the relationship between the two countries. Poroshenko bought the coal, which was more expensive than Ukraine had paid from expensive than Ukraine had paid for the same product from other sources. And he ended up having issues with the Ukrainian parliament over the cost. But after Trump had the rally, there was no further interaction between the two of them. So according to Poroshenko, he now had no reason to trust Trump. But he did tell me that he would wait to see what happened since the lines of communication had been open. Arriving back in the States, I began a series of regular meetings at the Trump International Hotel with Giuliani and what I later called the BLT team. Because we always met at the BLT Steakhouse Restaurant Hotel, the BLT team included Tunzing de Geneva and John Solomon, an investigative reporter who was working for The Hill and had many contacts at Fox News and the State Department, as well as having Trump on speed dial. Solomon gave us information at the meeting that he said various sources had shared with him about Biden's dealings in Ukraine. Giuliani then tasked me with traveling to Ukraine throughout March, April, and May of 2019 to interview different people who had promised to give us information and evidence, including records of bribes, bank records, and incriminating tapes. Yet every time I went on these trips and conducted these interviews, I came up with nothing. Lutsenko kept assuring me that they would announce an investigation of the Bidens, but that never happened either. Around the same time as the BLT team began meeting, I was introduced by phone to Congressman Devin Nunes, who was leading his own separate investigation into the Bidens. His team decided to work with the BLT team, and I was told to keep in contact with Nunes' staff member, Derek Harvey. While I was in Ukraine on these assignments, Nunes and Harvey asked me to help set up interviews that would facilitate their investigation. With my assistance, Harvey conducted numerous interviews with Ukrainian prosecutors, officials via Skype. During this process, the prosecutors initially expressed an interest in meeting Nunes directly and having him conduct an in-person interview in Ukraine. But Nunes declined, explaining to me again by phone that because Republicans did not have control of the House, they would have to report any travel they were doing. Therefore, we believed that it was better to have Derek Harvey conduct the interviews on Skype so the Democrats would not know what was going on. On one occasion, I even tried to set up an interview with Victor Shokin for Harvey, but Shokin told me that there was no need because the two had already spoken. At one point, Victoria Tunzing said to me that Senator Ron Johnson would also work as the BLT team's, quote, guy in the Senate, unquote, to push all the information that we were getting, which still amounted to the same unverified conspiracy theories. In March 2019, John Solomon had the idea to set up Fox News interviews with Poroshenko, Lutsenko, and Nazar Holoditsky, the head prosecutor of the then National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine called NABU. Shortly before his interview, Holoditsky had gotten caught up in some criminal activities, and then U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Ivanovich, called for him to be ousted from his position. During the taping of his interview, instead of talking about the Bidens as planned, Holoditsky complained about Yovanovitch's interfering in Ukraine politics. However, during his taping, he never validated nor confirmed that any illegal activities had been committed by either Hunter or Joe Biden. This statement upset Solomon and Giuliani, so the interview never aired to this day on Fox. 10 minutes before Poroshenko's interview was to take place, he decided not to participate. There was an intense phone conversation that I translated between Lutsenko and Giuliani, which ended up with Giuliani telling Lutsenko that if he couldn't get Poroshenko to do the interview, not to call anymore. During the argument with Giuliani, Lutsenko sent me an explicit written text. I read the original in Russian, but then the translation into English is essentially as follows, accommodating for language and context. Quote, sorry, but I didn't get a visa. But first, my president didn't get a damn thing. I'm ready to destroy your competitor, but you want more and more. You expect us to do everything, and everything we ask is later. It's not right. It's not fair. Finally, Lutsenko then said he would do an interview and give us a big bombshell about the situation in Ukraine, which Giuliani expected to be about the Bidens. But during the interview, instead of talking about the Bidens, Lutsenko spoke about Yovanovitch's new uncovered do not prosecute list, a list of names that basically she wanted him not to prosecute in Ukraine. It became a big scandal, but not long after the announcement, he retracted his statements, which made Giuliani extremely angry. Every time Giuliani and Lutsenko had spoken about the Bidens, he would answer that nothing had been found to incriminate them. Neither Joe nor Hunter Biden had done anything against the Ukrainian constitution or local laws. There was no evidence of bribery or extortion that anyone could find. At the same time, Lutsenko was worried he wouldn't be able to stay in office if Poroshenko lost his bid for re-election. So he did what he could to stay on Trump and Giuliani's good side, to appease them. He would sometimes make vague statements to media about Hunter and Joe Biden, but he never said they had committed any acts of corruption or that any investigation was being opened. There was simply nothing he had to substantiate those claims. By that point, the BLT team was watching the Ukrainian president elections and realized Vladimir Zelensky was probably going to win. The conversation shifted from Poroshenko to Lutsenko to getting a promise from Zelensky that he would announce an investigation into the Bidens. Giuliani assumed that because Zelensky was an actor and a comedian and not a politician, he would naturally want to do anything he could to establish good relationship with the U.S. I was tasked in April of 2019 to go to Ukraine and get in contact with Zelensky. Yet my attempts to contact him were constantly blocked by Igor Kolomoisky, a Ukrainian oligarch who was backing Zelensky financially at the time. Eventually, I flew to Israel, where Kolomoisky was living in exile, and explained Giuliani and Trump's stance on the matter and why we needed Zelensky to commence an investigation into the Bidens. Giuliani had also instructed me to tell Kolomoisky that he would help him with his legal problems in the U.S. if he would help us with Zelensky. As you see, these are flagrant examples of Giuliani interfering in Ukrainian politics. Ironically, the very thing he was desperate to prove that the Bidens were doing in Ukraine, and for which he could find no evidence at all, was what he was guilty of. By the end of April 2019, it was clear Zelensky would win in a landslide. We were preparing to set up a meeting between Zelensky and Giuliani, who was supposed to come to Ukraine on May 10th with Victoria Tunzing. Giuliani had given me a letter which I handed over on May 9th to Arsen Avakov, the Minister of Interior. The letter was to communicate to Zelensky that Giuliani wanted to discuss private matters pertaining to Trump as he represented Trump in his personal capacity. However, this meeting never occurred. On May 11th, Giuliani called me frantically in the middle of the night, saying that he'd been approached by Kash Patel, a member of Devin Nunes's team and a staffer for Trump's National Security Council. Patel informed him that people in Zelensky's inner circle were Trump enemies and that Giuliani could not meet in Ukraine now because it would be a setup. Instead, I was once again assigned to be the man on the ground to meet Zelensky myself on behalf of Giuliani and Trump and deliver a precise message in very strict words. Unless Zelensky announced an investigation into the Bidens, the U.S. would not deliver on certain promises. 1. Trump would tell Mike Pence not to attend Zelensky's inauguration. And 2. The U.S. would not send over any aid to Ukraine, military or otherwise. It would be Zelensky's chief of staff, Sergei Schaefer, and not the president himself who met me on that trip. After sharing a copy of the letter with Schaefer via WhatsApp, I reiterated Giuliani's message for Zelensky to Schaefer. Though he initially told me that Zelensky wanted a good relationship with the U.S. and would cooperate, we never heard from them after that. A few days later, I was told by Arsen Avakov, Minister of Interior, that Zelensky was told not to meet Giuliani or his team and that he should only go through proper channels with people from the U.S. Embassy. When I recited that message to Giuliani, he became enraged. On May 13th, Ukrainian officials got confirmation from the U.S. that Mike Pence would not attend Zelensky's inauguration, which caused turmoil inside the Ukrainian government. They didn't want their people to realize that the U.S. were essentially pulling out of its promise to provide aid. When Kolomoisky found out, he returned to the Ukraine and was furious about the situation. He went on to the media calling Fruman and me grifters, stating that we were trying to force Zelensky to do unethical things, and threatening our lives. On his end, Giuliani then began sending bullying messages to Zelensky on Twitter and disparaging him on Fox News. He would question Zelensky's power as president. He would insist that Zelensky arrest Kolomoisky immediately and repeat that Zelensky's inner circle was compromised of Trump's enemies, among other such statements. It was then decided that Giuliani and I would fly to Paris to discuss the next steps for Ukraine. While in Paris, Giuliani received a phone call from Rick Perry, then Secretary of Energy. Perry was calling from Air Force 2, explaining that Trump had assigned him to represent the U.S. at Zelensky's inauguration, and he was supposed to call Rudy for his exact instructions. The call was on speaker, so I heard every word. Giuliani outlined to Perry that he needed to relay the same message to Zelensky after the inauguration ceremony: announce an investigation into the Bidens, or the U.S. will pull its aid. Right after the inauguration, Perry called Giuliani to say he had delivered the message and Zelensky was willing to play ball. But when Zelensky did make an announcement the following day, it was a statement about addressing general corruption in Ukraine and never mentioned the Bidens. Giuliani again was angry, communicating with Trump that the Ukrainians were playing games. We knew at the same time Trump was also making several attempts to deliver messages to Zelensky through other members of his team outside of Giuliani, and all with the same theme: investigate Joe Biden or else. Near the end of our trip to Paris, we were introduced to one of Igor Fruman's associates, a friend who happened to be employed by a Ukrainian oligarch named Dmitry Firtash, who had many political and business connections, including with the head of Burisma Zlochevsky. When we returned to the U.S., we met with the BLT team, and John Solomon said Firtash's help would be a key because of his relationship with Zlochevsky. The problem was that Firtash would prove nearly impossible to contact. He was also facing a serious extradition case to the U.S. for a number of bribery, racketeering, and other charges since 2014. Solomon and Giuliani put together a package of documents regarding confidential information in the Firtash case and had me travel to Vienna in June of 2019 to meet with Firtash, letting him know that Giuliani and the whole team were serious that we could help him if he helped us. From June until the time of my arrest in October of 2019, we had ongoing communication with Dmitry Firtash. In the meeting with the BLT team, Solomon relayed to Giuliani that he had information that Robert Mueller's lead prosecutor, Andrew Weissman, offered Firtash a deal to cancel his extradition if he would testify against Trump and Putin. Firtash didn't want to get involved with Biden versus Trump situation, but was open to helping us in the Mueller investigation into Trump. Thereafter, as I became an interpreter between Firtash's new legal team and Firtash, most of the conversation in which I participated were potentially privileged. However, I believe this information may be made available to the House Oversight Committee through a congressional subpoena. But the true purpose of dangling this carrot in front of Firtash was to get him to use this context to pressure Zelensky to cooperate with the BLT team. Eventually, Giuliani proposed $1 million contract to represent Dmitry Firtash. Later, in similar fashion to the Lutsenko situation, he took it back and had Firtash sign a contract with Victoria Tunzing. Giuliani, however, would continue to oversee everything and remain in charge of matters related to Firtash. Then later, Giuliani and Tunzing had several phone calls, and I was privy to, with Bill Barr, leading to unofficial meetings in the lobby at the Trump International Hotel, and then an official meeting at the Department of Justice. At the same time, the BLT team was exploring many different angles to get information on the Bidens. In June, Giuliani asked me to accompany him to a lunch in New York with Vitaly Prus, a Russian businessman who claimed to have deep connections to Burisma, including with Hunter Biden's business partner Devon Archer, and had recommended powerful people to Zlochevsky that he should put on the company's board. During this meeting, Prus shared a story with us. He said earlier that year, while doing business related to Burisma, he had taken Hunter Biden to meet Kazakhstan Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that Biden had gotten substantially intoxicated with drugs and alcohol on that trip. While he was incapacitated, his laptop was compromised and copied by representatives of the FSB, Russian secret police, and members of the Zlochevsky's team. It's extremely important to note that certain aspects of Prus's story are verifiably true. This trip with Hunter Biden did happen, and his computer hard drives were taken and duplicated. But Prus specified that while the contents of the laptop were personally embarrassing to Hunter Biden, pictures of him doing drugs and surrounded by girls, there was no evidence of financial crimes or any data on his laptop that suggested illegal activities of any other kind, which is the sort of proof that Giuliani desperately needed. Prus never mentioned anything about the hard drives containing criminal information, only that there were embarrassing images. It was not until Giuliani began disseminating the story of Hunter Biden's laptop that the idea of proof of financial and political crimes were introduced. Giuliani continued the simultaneous efforts to reach Zlochevsky through Firtash and Prus. I specifically recall that Giuliani told me to tell Prus to pressure Zlochevsky by saying that he could be an enemy or a friend of Trump. At a meeting of the BLT team, Giuliani and Solomon came up with a series of 12 to 14 questions about the Bidens that we would propose to Zlochevsky. Eventually, we managed to get Zlochevsky's answers back, but his answers gave us nothing, because there was nothing. On reading Zlochevsky's reply, Giuliani turned red and yelled, "What is this shit? This is bullshit. Make sure nobody sees it. Bury this, Lev." I'll remind you that Zlochevsky's answers are in the report that the House Oversight Committee published. In this document, he stated that Hunter Biden was never asked or assigned to speak with anybody in the U.S. on behalf of Burisma, that there were no political or lobbying efforts on behalf of Burisma, that nobody from the company had ever spoken to Joe Biden, and that Hunter Biden was essentially innocent of what people had been implying. His letter basically debunked all the conspiracy theories. In August of 2019, Kurt Volker, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, approached Giuliani. He said that Trump had written Zelensky off and wasn't talking to him, but wanted Giuliani to emphasize to Trump that the relationship with Zelensky was crucial. He stressed that Zelensky needed to get support from the U.S. in Ukraine's ongoing war with Russia. While at the meeting, I was present with Giuliani and Volker at the Trump International Hotel in Washington. It was agreed that Giuliani opened the communication channels with Zelensky, and Trump as well as invited Zelensky to the White House. Then Zelensky would announce an investigation into the Bidens. A later meeting with Volker, Giuliani, and then U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, and Rick Perry took place to discuss the details of the investigation, announcement into the phone call, with Zelensky Chief of Staff Andrei Yermak. I was then tasked with traveling to Spain to attend a meeting with Yermak and Giuliani. In that meeting, Giuliani continued the hard pressure of Yermak to tell Zelensky to make an announcement about the Bidens. Giuliani also brought up Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, who had met with Giuliani several times in New York. He informed Yermak that he knew Zelensky wanted to fire Klitschko and emphasized this would be a bad idea because Klitschko was well liked by Trump and the American people. Again, this is a blatant example of Giuliani interfering in foreign politics. Zelensky's aim was to clear out corruption in the Ukrainian government. Unfortunately, the war has limited Zelensky's opportunity to address this. However, there was no possible reason why Giuliani should have been suggested who should play any role in Ukrainian government. So in early part of October 2019, I got a call telling me to go to Vienna with Giuliani, where the former chief financial officer of Burisma, Alexander Gorbanenko, would meet Giuliani and give us Hunter Biden's hard drive and answer any questions we had. My Ukrainian contacts also told me that we would have Viktor Shokin in Vienna to give an interview to Sean Hannity of Fox News. Because Shokin was supposed to appear in a Viennese court on behalf of Dmitry Firtash, giving sworn testimony in court that would basically be saying that what Giuliani wanted him to say, that he was fired because of Joe Biden. As mentioned earlier, Biden did make the statements that he had helped to get Shokin fired, but Ukrainian investigations into Hunter some years later concluded that Shokin had been terminated because of multiple cases of corruption while in office. I have text messages confirming all these plans, and all are among the material I submitted to Congress during the first impeachment of President Trump. These include messages from Hannity setting up the interviews, messages coordinating that with Giuliani, Tunzing, and things that I would go to Vienna to meet Burisma's ex-CFO Gorbanenko. Just before we were to fly to Austria, there was a meeting at Fox News in Washington because Solomon was appearing that night on Hannity and Giuliani was appearing on Laura Ingraham. The BLT team got together in Fox conference room and discussed how we would blow up the story once we got Hunter Biden's hard drive in Vienna. The next morning, Giuliani met me for breakfast and said Trump needed him at the White House. He would be unable to go to Vienna and insisted that I and Igor Fruman should go and set up everything, and he would join us later. Tunzing then contacted me and saying that she could not go to Vienna either because her husband had a cold. Shortly after, on October 9, 2019, that day, Fruman and I were arrested at Dulles International Airport while trying to make our first leg of our flight to Vienna. Throughout all these months of work and extensive campaigns and networking done by Trump allies and Giuliani associates, including the enormously thorough interviews and assignments that I undertook, there has never been any evidence that Hunter or Joe Biden committed any crimes related to Ukraine politics. Never during any of my communications with Ukrainian officials or connections to Burisma did any of them confirm or provide concrete facts linking the Bidens to illegal activities. In fact, they asked me multiple times why our team was so concerned with this idea. The truth is that everyone from Giuliani and the BLT team to Devin Nunes and his colleagues to the people of Fox News knew that these allegations against the Bidens were false. There has never been any factual evidence, only conspiracy theories spread by people who knew exactly what they were doing. With all due respect, Chairman Comer, the narrative you are seeking for this investigation has been proven false many times over by a wide array of respected sources. There is simply no merit to investigating these matters any further. I hope my letter has provided you with additional clarity on this point. Please know that in my sharing this information with you, I am not looking for any sympathy for myself. I take full responsibility for my own actions in this matter, and I'm extremely remorseful for my participation. In explaining the full context to you here, I can only hope that my truth can be used for the greater good. Please abandon these efforts to investigate the Bidens, which is nothing more than a wild goose chase, and let our elected officials return to the issue at hand of uniting our country to be a stronger and better one than ever before. I want you to know I'm willing to testify under oath in front of Congress regarding any of these matters and answer any questions that you might have, or provide you with any texts or correspondences in these situations, as I have described in this letter. So there you have it, folks. That was my 10-page letter that I wrote to James Comer. And what did he do? He basically looked the other way, just like they do all the time, because they don't want the truth. They don't want to get to the bottom of it. All they want to do is give you bits and pieces. They want to give you conspiracy theories. They want to confuse the people, all for the simple fact to deflect from the real criminal, like I said, Donald J. Trump. Thank you for watching. You can follow me on Twitter or Threads or Instagram at Lev Parnas. And please make sure to subscribe to the MeidasTouch Network.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.